Welcome back to episode 3 of the Insightful Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Fairley, and today's guest is none other than Gathan D. Borden, one of the brightest minds in the destination marketing space and a newly published author. With nearly 2 decades in destination marketing, Gathan is known for blending innovation, storytelling, and strategy to help destinations thrive. In this episode, we dive deep into Gathan's background and what got him started in the industry, his thoughts on effective leadership, why authenticity matters in tourism marketing, and last but certainly not least, his recently published book, The Everyday Marketer. If you're passionate about tourism, destination marketing, and leadership and travel, this conversation is packed with insights you won't want to miss. So sit back, relax, and as always, be on the lookout for that quiz at the end. Back to the Insightful Podcast, episode 3. The podcast where we explore the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of tourism. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Fairley, and today super thrilled to be joined by someone who's been at the forefront of destination marketing for nearly 2 decades, Gathan D. Borden. For those of you who don't know, Gathan is the Client Relationships and Insights Manager at Tourism Economics, and he's known for blending data, creativity, and strategy to help destinations all over the country and to some degree all over the world tell their stories in powerful ways. He's a thought leader, a mentor, and a champion for inclusive and sustainable tourism. And most recently, and what I definitely want to talk about today, is a published author. And of course, I got the book swag here
Yeah.
too. A little
You got
book
to,
here. So
yes, sir. I
I'll
appreciate
add
that.
some nice little graphics in post. We'll make that look all fancy. But yeah, so excited to have you here, man. Thanks for joining.
No, man, I'm excited to be here, man. Like, this is exciting. Congratulations to you on setting up this podcast, this new adventure you're on, man. So congratulations to you as
Yeah, man,
well.
I'm trying to get more like you. I'm trying to be, to get more like you and be out there in those spaces and be out there speaking. But this has been fun. So again, thank you
Oh
for
man.
jumping on and being guest number 3. But my first industry guest, because I'm kind of splitting this between academia, which was my interview with AJ.
Okay.
Then I did another one with a former student. So
Yep.
you're the first practitioner in the space. So we can
Ah,
go ahead
man.
and
Well, I'm honored,
yeah,
brother.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
honored.
We can go ahead and dive into it, man. I don't know if I've ever asked you this before. Maybe I kind of heard you speak on in the past, but talk to me about your background, man. Just where that tourism journey started. For me specifically, getting into tourism was just all by accident. Kind of stumbled into it. Like one of
Yeah.
my first jobs here was literally because I knew
Yeah.
someone who worked in the office, and it just sort of developed from there. But I didn't have a ton of background, if any, on tourism. So, like for you, and I mentioned earlier, you've been in tourism marketing for over 18 years. Doesn't that make you feel old? Because I'm right around there with you.
Man, what you
Yeah,
said.
18 years. I'm just like, I ain't done nothing for 18 years straight. But what first drew you to this industry?
For
And,
sure.
I can ask that first and then kind of, how's your perspective evolved over time? But kind of, how did you get started in all this?
Man, to be honest, like a lot of people, probably 90% of the people who you talk to, like I stumbled into it as well. So, back in 2007, Louisville Tourism, they had created this new marketing manager role, and I just applied for it. I knew I wanted to be a marketer, and I could never find a marketing job. I was doing sales at the time,
Oh,
and
snap.
I was actually kind of good at sales, but I hated having that number over top of my head. I was like, I got to get out of here, man. So they opened up that job, and I had no marketing experience, no industry experience, but I won them over in the interview process. I credit that to all the sales background I had. But basically, my job there was just to serve as the connection point between the tourism office and the two marketing agencies that we had. We had one agency that did leisure marketing, another agency that did convention marketing. And so, and then, like I said at the time, I had no idea that this industry even existed. But kind of what hooked me into like staying, when I realized that tourism really isn't just about selling; it's really about telling the story of a place and the people that are in it. And it really wasn't until 2012 I received a promotion, and then I kind of realized, I was like, man, I think I want to stay in this industry. This is something I want to stay into. So, from there, I just went on to lead Lexington's marketing team for seven years, and then I spent 2 years at Destination International as the SVP of Marketing and Communications, and then now I'm 1 year into my role here at Tourism Economics on the other side of the business, man. So
Yeah, you came to the
it's been a good journey, man. Very rewarding so far, and I've been excited. And I'm excited to see what else comes next for
yeah,
me.
you came to the dark side, the vendor side, kind of where I've been. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what they
yeah, the
say,
vendor
right?
side. Yeah, I remember because when you were at Louisville, and just kind of circling back on that, I feel like your job title when you got promoted, like you mentioned a second ago, was it like director of brand or something like that? And that was kind of when I feel like I don't know if it
Yeah.
started with you being there, but the whole bourbon country or the whole, just kind of it sort of being known for the bourbon product, if you will. Talk to me a little bit about that and just how that evolved,
Yep.
because I feel like you guys very much became known for that.
Oh, totally, man. Like that was, I think back my third day on the job, we actually went to visit a distillery. It was
Mm,
Buffalo Trace. I met Freddie Johnson, who was a third generation distillery worker, African American. He's the only African American that was working at the distillery at the time.
wow.
And my dad was a huge Jack Daniels drinker. So all I knew about, whiskey was just Jack Daniels. I didn't know much else. But Freddie, when I met him, he took us on this tour and he was telling these great stories about himself, his father, and his grandfather. And I was kind of blown away by the stories of bourbon. And so in Louisville, Louisville, it's the big dog in the state. We're the biggest city. Most people come to Louisville. It's the most urban place in the state of Kentucky. And it used to be like back in the 1700s, there was probably north of 200 distilleries that were in Louisville. But then after Prohibition, they all got wiped out. So you had all these distilleries like around the state. I think at the time there might have been like seven distilleries I think you could visit at that time back in '07, either seven or nine. I can't remember the exact number. But anyway, we didn't have any experiences in Louisville. And so what we did was we created this urban bourbon trail program. And so it was basically an idea to get people to experience bourbon culture at night from bars and restaurants. We had all these rules and stipulations, like you had to have 50 bourbons on the menu, cook with bourbon inspired cuisine, embrace the culture. And the idea was like, people can go out and see the distilleries by day, but then come back to Louisville at nighttime. So we try to infuse that to try to bring in those overnight stays into Louisville. But yeah, we started doing that. And I think that's kind of when, my career kind of took off because I was able to do some really fun and creative things as I started marketing, like some stuff in Chicago that we were doing because it was the top bourbon consumption market for us, bourbon travel market rather for us for tourism. So yeah, we did some crazy campaigns up there, man, and that kind of got me started on this path of creativity,
Yeah, that's so cool, especially because I'm always interested in like, how the community gets involved in that and something like that where you're talking about going out to the restaurants and making sure that everybody's aligned on what this experience and to some degree like what this brand persona that you built, how they can execute on it so that like you're in lockstep. So I always feel like
Yeah.
that's just that's a community outreach and sort of going out there and being in the community and because it's one thing for you to sell it, but they have to execute on it. So I always feel like that's
Yep. Yep.
just that's a cool part of our industry whenever we get to do great things like that and you know and then you become a bourbon
So
man I feel like to some degree so
yeah, like I'm telling you, man, like I fell in love with it, and so even when I got to it's funny because all the stuff that I was doing in Louisville, when I got to Lexington, everybody was like, okay, are you going to do the same thing in Lexington? I'm like, no, like they're
yeah
two different cities, two different experiences. And I said, we got to hone in on what we're good at in Lexington. But to continue the bourbon stuff, I did do me and some other friends of mine, we actually co-founded the Kentucky Black Bourbon Guild in Lexington, which is an affinity group. And the idea was really to create a bourbon affinity group that wasn't really about, you know, doing drinkings or tastings or events. It was more so about how do we honor the history of African Americans and other minority contribution to the industry? And then how do we make the industry more diverse going forward? Because if you ever been to a distillery, like you'll rarely see people of color and you rarely see women. So all you really see is white men. And so the idea was like, well, women drink bourbon, people of color drink bourbon, but we're not being
yeah
reflected in the workforce. And so our organization kind of helps infuse that by we have partnerships with local universities here in the state of Kentucky, where we award scholarships
oh
to
sweet
students to get them into like science and fermentation programs to get them involved. And some of our members have actually been able to get job offers and receive jobs from some distilleries in the state. So it's been a rewarding experience, man. We started that back in 2019 that we launched that. So that was
oh
pretty
yeah when I
exciting.
was doing my interview with AJ I knew you were involved in something like that and you have to forgive me if you watch it I ridiculously downplayed it because I remember reading about it I think you had posted something on Facebook so I probably horribly described it but I think it's
Yeah.
cool that you're in that, and again, just representation like that's a huge part of it because again, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely
It matters.
underrepresented in that regard. So I want to jump to kind of what you had sort of alluded to in Lexington. Completely different. You go from bourbon
Yeah.
to and I always get it confused because I live in Florida, and as you know, there's a Ocala, Marion,
Uh-huh.
and which one,
Oh,
the
I already know what
the
you're about to say.
which one is the horse
The
capital of the
horse
world?
capital of
I
the
always
world,
get them
man.
confused. Forgive me, but like,
So I tell you what's the here's the thing. There and I found this out probably a couple years after I got into Lexington. So apparently, um, both Lexington and Ocala filed for the actual trademark for horse capital of the world. So apparently, both trademarks basically went through at the same time, but I think Ocala's got approved first. So Ocala can actually say they're the horse capital of the world. When Lexington uses it, technically, we're supposed to say Lexington, Kentucky dash the horse capital of the world. So we have to have a qualifier at the beginning of it. But at the end of the day, and nothing against Ocala, but I usually tell people, I was like, if you when you think about the entire equine industry, we not just the horse farms, but you think, well, if you include the horse farms, which is like 450 of them in the central Kentucky area, then you think about the Kentucky Derby winners. About 80% of those Kentucky Derby winners were all born and bred right here in Kentucky. And then also you throw in the equine medical facilities of how you care for horses, the aftercare programs that are here that actually take retired race horses and turn them into something else, whether it's at a retirement farm or use them for another purpose. Like all that stuff is here in Central Kentucky in the Lexington area. So that's why we tout it, and it's part of the logo in Lexington as well. So
nice. Yeah, I feel like whenever there's like the autobiography of Gathan, it's going to be like from bourbon to horses or something like that. It'll be like,
yeah,
transition, something like that. Who knows? That might end up being the title for this podcast. I don't know. I'm still tweaking, words
right.
and everything. But yeah, it was a pleasure for me to just to be able to kind of watch you work, especially when you were in Lexington, because just like I was saying, alluding to earlier, two completely different things. What was that transition like? Because like you
Yeah,
were saying earlier, a lot of people, you were hired based off of your experience and what you had done, and I'm sure some other reasons, but like based off of what you had done in Louisville, and they're expecting you to do something similar there. So just talk about the pivot, if you could, for a little bit, just to.
yeah. I'll tell you, man. Like, so when I was in Louisville, like I wanted to stay, but there just wasn't the opportunity, which is a huge issue
Oh
that's in
yeah,
our industry where there's just not a lot of opportunities for vertical
unless you were to
growth,
stay
right?
15, 20
And I'm
years
lucky
or
that I
something, and
had,
yeah, and then get promoted. Yeah,
yeah, right. I'm blessed, man, honestly, that, I had two CEOs in Louisville who really supported my growth, but I had a boss, Stacey Yates, who's the VP of marketing. She hired me in Louisville. She's always been my biggest cheerleader. And when an opportunity came for Lexington, Mary Quinn, who was the president at Lexington, she actually called Stacey and said, "Hey, I'm trying to get together some names of people who I can interview for this VP job. Do you know anybody?" And she said, "Don't look any further. You need to hire
that's
Gathan
what's up right
immediately."
there.
And that was my boss. It was amazing, man. So, when I decided to leave to go to Lexington, of course, everybody's like, "Hold on, dude. Like, you're going from the big dog of the city to like little brother, so you're going from a city that's got a population north of a million to a city that's got a population now of 300,000. You're going from a budget of, at that time in 2015, the budget was probably like 12 million. When I got to Lexington in 2015, I think the budget was like 4 million, and so they were just like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, well, to me, it was about the
Yeah,
challenge because I'm pretty ambitious, but I also wanted to see like, man, am I really good at this marketing thing? Or did I just happen to come into Louisville at the right time and I rode the Bourbon wave and all my success is credited to just because Bourbon was the move. So I was like, let me see if I can really do this thing. And so when I got to Lexington, that was a challenge. Mary Quinn, she gave me free reign to do whatever I wanted to do because she was like, I want you to revamp our entire marketing program from top to bottom. And that's what I was able to do. And I think, that those 7 years were probably I would probably say those were the most celebrated years that I've had in the industry because man, it was just award after award
yeah,
after award, man, between, our team and our creative team at Cornet, who was the local agency that we used. We had such great vibes together. Man, we were doing some epic stuff there. And it was stuff that nobody had ever seen before, but I credit, Mary Quinn gave me the environment to actually be creative, and she created that atmosphere that was conducive to, stretching the boundaries a little bit and doing some things that were different, but they always produce results. There's some campaigns that I wanted to do that I presented to her and she's like, "Nah, ain't no way we're doing this." Like there's some bad ones out there. There was some that was like I was pushing the needle way too far. And she was like, "I can't do this, Gay," because the politicians ain't going to go for this. We're trying to get some ARPA funding. We can't put this campaign out right now. So um, but yeah, so it's probably been honestly the most of my when I think back to my career, that 7 years is probably the most rewarding experience too, because also it was my first time ever
Leading people, yeah.
leading a team and managing a team and like hiring. I hired two people. It's my first time ever hiring people, going through the hiring process. But then, thinking back to your point when you say like people stay in the industry for a long time, I inherited a team who had already been there for like north of 15 years. So I'm the new guy. I'm younger than everybody at that point in time, and I'm trying to like bring in my own style, my own leadership style, and kind of really I'm going to flip the script a little bit because I'm doing things
Yeah.
completely different than what they've been doing for the last 15 years. So it was a bit of a challenge, man, but it worked out really well.
Yeah, and I think that's cool too because I've had I always there's always types of different ways that I assess leadership, but when I think about the great leaders that I have, they're the ones who gave me the freedom, to do certain things. And obviously there were some constraints on it, but for the most part, they were like, "This is your show. I'm going to support you, and for the most part, make sure that you have everything you need to succeed." And I've had great leaders like that, and then I've had some that weren't like that, and it's such a contrast, and it makes it difficult, like to
Yeah,
go, not
man.
necessarily difficult to go to work every day, but like there's just something to be said about having that support in leadership. And I'm sure you kind of transferred that, to your own team, when you started hiring people, like trusting people to do their jobs, and and that they're going to do,
Yeah, man.
they're going to do great things for you, and giving them that fire, if you will, or that freedom. So yeah,
Yeah, I think like with that leadership piece, as I used to tell people, it's like a couple things on that is like I tell people like transparency is key, right? When I say transparency, it's like you don't have to share all the business with the team, but it's really about helping the people understand why decisions are being
yeah,
made. Folks don't always have to agree, which is okay, but that frustration really is what builds. And then when that frustration builds and people are told what we're doing without any context, that's really frustrating. People are like, man, I don't want to stay here because I'm not being trusted with the right information. So I've always made it a point, even when I was elected, I told the team, I said, hey, here's some decisions that are coming down the pipeline. I can guarantee y'all are not going to agree with this,
yeah.
but I'm going to tell you, here's what we're doing. Here's why and they appreciated that, man, because I was honest with them. Like I'm one of four executives here. Like I can't override everything. I can voice my opinion. I can take your opinions to the team. But at the end of the day, if I get voted out, then that is what it is. So we have to kind of agree to disagree on some of these
That's
things.
crazy. I've heard you say it a couple of times. 7 years, like again, as somebody who was watching from afar, it doesn't seem like 7 years. Like that seems like a long time, but just
I
like that
know, right?
7 years just flew by. Between that, like 7 years, and maybe drawing back on your time at Louisville, were there any like pivotal moments? And they can either be campaigns or experiences that, or maybe just kind of shaped you, or just kind of made you realize like where you were in, or the space you were in. Because for me, I remember being at Visit Tampa Bay, and I'd probably been there a couple of years, and I'd never really paid attention to it. But we had done our, like our annual report, and I just started to dive into those numbers a little bit more. And I think like what made me realize the impact that I had, even just as a small digital guy sitting behind a desk, was like I'm contributing to people having jobs in this community. Like the economic development part of this
Yeah.
was that was my moment where I'm just like I want to be doing this for a long time because I just like again small person sitting behind a computer with the headphones, but like knowing that something that I built or something that I pushed out, with the help of the team, that's helping people have jobs because it's bringing
Mhm.
people here. What was that moment for you, or was it a campaign, or
Man, there's a couple things that stick out to me in Louisville. Like obviously the bourbon thing was a huge campaign for us because that was an opportunity where again we hadn't branded the city yet. We were in this kind of I don't want to say a fight, but it was kind of like a contradiction. The city itself created this possibility city brand campaign, which was a combination of us, the chamber, and the mayor's office. And it was basically that whole you can be a big fish in a small pond kind of thing, like the whole aspirational piece of how you market a destination, and it appealed to everybody. We were always like, man, you can't really talk to everybody. We have to know like what we're good at. And so once we honed in on the bourbon piece, we started doing the Chicago thing. So in Chicago, we actually did this thing called what we call station domination. So basically, there's an orange loop of the train station that takes you from the orange loop all the way out to the Midway Airport. And Midway is an hour flight from Louisville to Chicago on Southwest Airlines. Chicago was a top traveler market for Louisville. And so basically we did a station domination where we branded the entire transit system along with all the poles, all the soffits, anything you could think of in that area. We branded it all with the Bourbon Country message. And when we did it, we spoke directly to people in Chicago. Like one of the lines was, Illinois has corn, but Kentucky knows what to do with it. Basically playing off the fact that Illinois grows
Yeah.
off corn, but you got to have 51% corn to have bourbon, right? So it was all this bourbon stuff. And it taught me, man, like how to be kind of bold and how to be risky and how to make it like come through with like big fonts, short one liners and strong visuals, how that really resonated. Because when people are walking through, you probably got 5 to 6 seconds for somebody to see your message and keep on walking. So we had to make sure that it stood out. But during that time, I actually became really good friends with the agency that we were working with. The CEO was actually the executive creative director, one of the most creative guys that I've ever been around, and I got to be good friends with him. And it kind of just opened my eyes to like just creativity as whole. So I think about that campaign was pivotal. Another one which was really pivotal was on the meeting side, which a lot of people don't do standout campaigns on the meeting side. But I came up with this idea. If you remember the book, the what's it called? The Seven Habits of
Mhm.
Highly Effective People. So basically, we flipped that into a campaign and we called it the Seven Habits of Highly Effective Meeting Planners. And so we took the seven major selling points of Louisville and tied them in to what meeting planners actually care about when they're booking a destination. So, like, what we would do is every one of those selling points had a marketing message, an ad, and it had a mailing package that we would send out to our top meeting planners, reinforcing the message. But the funniest one that we did, there's a couple of them that were really funny, but one that was really funny was we were talking about the culinary scene, right? So Louisville's got a great culinary scene, award winning. It's always being covered. And so we were talking about how the culinary scene here for your meetings and conventions is better than the standard rubber chicken you always get
Mhm. Yeah.
at a convention or a meeting, right? So when we mailed the marketing package to them, we actually put a rubber chicken in a box along with the marketing message. And we got so many calls from meeting planners who just like they got a kick out of it, man. They were like, this is so funny and weird, but also on message. And so they were calling the sales manager. But what it did was it actually opened up an avenue for the sales team to actually have conversations with planners who weren't returning their calls or returning their emails. So I think there I just realized, man, it was just like, it's more beyond, promoting places. It's really about like how do we connect culture and humor and storytelling to make the city stand out. And those campaigns, man, they just set the tone for me, kind of laid the foundation. And those are pretty pivotal for what I did in Lexington. We did all the stuff we did with horses is, I could that list is so long, man, but
Yeah.
like basically everything that I did in Louisville, I was able to do that in Lexington with all the horses, man. So that was
I
really
would have
exciting.
paid money to be in the room when you were either trying to run this by your CEO. It's like, so we're gonna put a chicken in a box,
Hey man,
and like just trying to
yeah,
walk through that.
the conversations were wild, man.
Yeah, but again, that's like a testament of just good leadership to be able to take an idea like that and just listen. Because I know some, and I'm not gonna
Yeah,
say any or whether or not I work for them, but like the moment you said chicken in a box, you would the conversation would have been like, no, like we ain't doing that. No, no,
yeah, it would have been over for a lot of
we ain't
people.
doing that. So no, yeah. That's a good segue to kind of where I wanted to jump to next, just in terms of innovation and authenticity. Like you're known for blending innovation and authenticity again with some of the stories that you were telling. Like, what does that mean for you? And you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but like in the context of destination marketing, because you were like, Mr. I would say you were like Mr. Innovation, Mr. Fashion Clean. What they say, clean it in the board of health, like
I
clean it in the board of
appreciate
health, wherever
it. Right.
wherever you are. But like, what does that mean to you in the context of our industry and destination marketing, and how important is that innovation and authenticity?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, for me, blending innovation with authenticity, it kind of starts with knowing who you are as a destination. And just as importantly, that you also got to know
Yeah,
who you're not. And I think that's the struggle that a lot of people they kind of know a little bit who they are, but they also don't know who they're not. And then they end up being this whole, well, we have something for
yeah.
everybody. And I'm
Like
like, you
you
don't have
can't
something
do
for
that.
everybody, man. You can't do that, man. So you have to be clear about, your brand pillars and staying consistent with, that messaging, even when the locals push back. Because, truth is like the locals, they aren't, even though they're not the primary audience, they still matter, but they see these same brand pillars every day and, they take them for granted. So if you can win their buy-in, that's going to be super golden there. But for me, usually when I tell people like about marketing, for me at its core, great marketing really comes down to just really three simple things. It's truth, shared experiences, and culture. And all three of those are actually rooted.
This is
There you
yeah.
go. All three of those are actually, although I didn't even put it in the book, I didn't even think about it until after I wrote. I said, man, I should put that in the book somewhere. Maybe I'll do it in the second book. But all three of those, man, like truth, shared experiences, and culture, like they're all rooted in authenticity. And the innovation is really about how do you bring, those truths to life in new ways. And so it doesn't always have to be like a big fancy campaign or like an industry first. Sometimes it's simply about doing something you've never done before that can still connect with people to show that you like who you truly are as a destination.
Yeah, and to circle back on what you were saying before, like I've seen it so many times, just for working because I've worked, at an agency and then on the vendor side, when you have that conversation where they're like, "Oh, well, we're trying to be 10 different things," it's just like, nah, because you're gonna just, it's
Nah,
impossible to
man,
be that many
that
things.
ain't gonna
Yeah,
work.
because then you're spreading yourself thin, and you're not really focused on, maybe that
Too
truest
thin.
message that will get through to that visitor or that meeting planner because you're trying
Right.
to be so many things and just spreading resources thin, and then just just resource wise, like you're just spreading yourself thin. So it's always just that like don't do that moment. Find what you're good
Yeah.
at, and then and kind of focus on it. So I 100% hear you there. I know you have been working
Yeah.
with tourism economics now and doing a lot, working on the client side. How are you and your team just kind of helping destinations stay true to their identity while embracing new trends? Because again, especially like for a destination that's been the same thing forever, forever. Like, how is it to like help them kind of embrace that identity, but
Yeah.
also bring in those new trends? Just be open minded. I feel like that's got to be a challenge for some more than others, but
Yeah. It is a challenge, man. But I think like, at the end of the day, the data is going to tell you who you are. So I think you have
yeah,
to look at, kind of like what content is getting good engagement. And then you have to ask yourself, like, what are those two or three things that people associate with your destination? Where do you send out of town friends when they visit? That's your authentic identity. And data just helps validate all that. So for me, like when I think about my clients, it's like if they were struggling with an issue, I'm like, well, let's go look at the data. Like, let's look at some GA4 stuff. Let's look at some social stuff. What are people engaging with? What do what's resonating? That's what you hone in on. And so I think from there, once you're able to figure out what you hone in on, it's like when it comes to trends, it's kind of like the idea is the trend really needs to just amplify your authentic story. It doesn't need to overwrite it. And so a trend like doesn't align with who you are. Well, I'll say a trend doesn't always align with who you are long term. The
yes,
real test
where
is
you
kind
are
of
now.
like whether it helps you connect with, yeah, with the right visitors in a way, excuse me, in a way that kind of feels authentic. And so I think, embracing those trends, again, we talked about a minute ago, it's like it comes down to leadership. The environment has to be open to it. If your hands are tied, which happens in a lot of cases for a lot of people, I tell people, start small. I said, if you remember, like, I always use this reference. Like, do you ever watch House of
Oh yeah,
Cards on
yeah, I love that.
Netflix? Oh, man, show was cold, man. So
That
listen,
last season was a little
so
weird,
like,
but
how the political guy, yeah, the last season was weird, man. But like the
oh
first
yeah,
couple seasons, man, I was like, this show was on point,
I
man.
remember a random story.
So
Like
like, and
I
if you
was living
notice,
in DC. I was working for DI. I was living in DC, and I was still trying to get familiar with being there. And I just sometimes there were plenty of days where I just didn't go out for days at a time because I was just stuck watching House of Cards because I was just glued to
yeah,
that screen. I don't think I've ever been just glued to a screen. I remember one time I spent an entire weekend,
man,
didn't leave, didn't get out of bed, and just like it was just a cold show.
yeah,
It was just cold.
man, it's so good. But one of the things that they did in that show, which a lot of you've heard about it, but I kind of my first time really seeing it was like the back channel conversations, right? Like you had all these
Yeah,
politicians like having these back channel conversations, not telling anybody what's going on. And I said, honestly, like that's really how you push innovation. I said, you got to have some back channel conversations with your internal staff or your coworkers to try to get some of that buy-in because that's going to create some of that momentum from the ground up. And that way, then when you want to take it up to leadership, you already have some support behind you. You're not just winging it like a one-time offer. It's like, no, I've shown this to like 5 or 6 people. They like it too. And so now you have that
yeah.
support. So I kind of tell people like take that approach because that tends to work really, really
Yeah,
well.
when I was at Visit Tampa Bay, that was my I had to do all back channeling because, at the time we were trying to do
Yep.
really trying to do like that you're familiar with this, trying to do smart, innovative stuff for senior leadership who I loved all of them. I loved that entire leadership team, but weren't used to doing smart and innovative. It was status quo. So I was having to back channel, talk to other members of the staff, and just do like a lot of back channel stuff so that I could build an argument to kind of bring to them. But like like you're saying, like the House of Cards example, like there was a lot of just background stuff that nobody knew I was doing to try to understand things a little bit better for myself because I had my ideas, but then I wanted to kind of hear what everybody else was thinking, and then using that to go to my boss Steve Hayes at the time. Like I always had to I had to learn very early on that I couldn't go into Steve's office with just a half baked idea. Like I had to, because he would
Yeah,
shoot,
man.
either shoot it down or poke like a thousand holes
Rip
into
it
it, and I
apart.
was just like, damn, Steve, like
Yep.
just say yes. But like, he couldn't do
Yeah,
it. But I
man.
had to.
Give
Yeah,
me a
but
chance.
I had to build those stories, and a lot of that was back channeling, man. So no, I 100% I'm with you there. We talked about this and kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, specifically as it relates to Louisville, but this can apply to any of your experience. But the role that storytelling plays in making tourism like more inclusive and impactful. I think like what you were saying about Louisville and your work with the guild and kind of starting to tell some of those stories about people who are underrepresented in that space. But talk to me about storytelling, and how you've been able to make that inclusive and impactful to some degree.
Yeah, I think like, one thing that I usually tell people, like at the heart of, to me, the fabric of marketing is all, storytelling is really at the fabric of marketing. Like every product
Yeah.
has a story. So it's kind of like, if you think back, it's like, it's how we learned as kids through books. It's how we get entertained through TV, movies, now even through sports, because now you have access to like these players' lives. Like it's all storytelling. Like I'm a huge soap opera guy. Like I love soap operas, man. Like the stories, I just feel like I've been watching, listen, dude, I've been watching Bold and Beautiful for 30
Yep.
years, man.
I haven't.
Like it is so
And the
bad,
funny thing
man.
is, I don't watch it as often, but there was a stretch where like Days of Our Lives was my thing. Back when I was younger,
Yeah,
Marlena and
man.
John, when Marlena got possessed, and Marlena and Stefano, and like the
Yeah.
stories, and like, it's funny because like, and this is just a random story, but like, all my friends got into it too. Like, we'd come to school and like, hey, you see Marlena, like we all got into the stories.
Yes,
I
sir.
was only a Days of Our Lives person. I never got into Young and the Restless and Bold and Beautiful, but no, I get you, and I love how we call it the
Yeah.
stories.
Well, now, yeah, man. But now I'm into Beyond the Gates, which is the new black drama that they had that comes on after. But so now I got two of them that I watch. But
Yeah, yeah.
anyway, I say
Next
all that to
podcast,
say,
we'll talk
man,
about that. Yeah.
like, you know, right? Yeah. But when you think about it, everything that we watch on TV that entertains us or educates us is a
Mhm.
story. Like you think of all of these reality shows, they're all stories. They're scripted and they're all stories, but so I think, obviously in tourism, storytelling just opens the book on the destination. And so if you do it right, it's not just about highlighting the attractions. It's really about how do you bring in like all the races, all the genders, all the cultures together, because travelers really what they want to, at the end of the day, they just want to see themselves in your marketing because today people, they don't just buy the product, the people, they're buying into the people and the stories behind
Yep.
that product. And so, I think it's just like it's just not only about the traveler anymore, so like that inclusive storytelling, like it also gives locals and especially underrepresented voices in our communities, right, who probably don't even really know what tourism is. It just gives them a chance to share their own perspective, and it just shows how real the culture of a place is and not just the polished version that we've been doing for years and years. And I think that impact of that, it goes beyond just marketing because those inclusive stories, like they expand the audience, they really help you deepen like the economic value of tourism, which is something that all organizations face. Like I said, it doesn't have to be like a huge campaign, but it can be as simple as, just featuring just some diverse travelers in your content or spotlighting some neighborhoods that aren't always on the brochure. But when your storytelling is inclusive, the destination, it just becomes more authentic and way more impactful.
Nice. Yeah. Uh, Jumping topics again, because and again, I feel like most of everything that I wrote down, we've already covered to some degree. So I'm circling back to a lot of stuff. But leadership, you served on industry boards. We were talking about the guild, and you've mentored future leaders. What advice do you give people emerging professionals in tourism? Like, what's leadership look like for you at this point? Has it evolved over time, or I mean, I feel like it's going to always evolve. But like, what's that leadership and mentorship look
Yeah.
like to you? And any advice you'd give to
Yeah, and
young
I think
folk? I feel old saying that.
yeah, I think no, you're right, man. Because listen, I have there's a couple of coworkers I have. They're like, I think they're like 24 and 25. I
Babies.
was like, oh man, I could be your daddy,
Babies.
man. Like, what is going on? Yeah, but I love it though because I learn a lot from them. But I also have the ability now. Like I tell people, like I'm an OG now. I have the ability to kind of give you my perspective on the industry, and so I've just been fortunate to be a part of some really great organizations, both inside and outside of tourism. My biggest piece of advice, which I tell people is like, people who know me know that I love quotes, but my biggest one is always success occurs when preparation meets opportunity. And so that applies to like emerging professionals, but also to established leaders alike. I tell people, write down your goals, manifest what you want to accomplish, and then kind of work backwards to kind of help prepare yourself for those moments because, opportunities don't always arrive when you're actively looking for them. So you can't afford to be caught off guard, which I used to tell people, I say, you're never going to catch me off guard. Like I'm
Yeah.
always going to be on. And so tourism isn't, it's a people business. And so your network is often going to open those doors that your resume doesn't. So you got to build those relationships with your peers as much as your mentors. And then speaking of mentors, like you got to have a mentor, but don't stop at one. I always tell people like mentors serve us for a reason and for a season. So some seasons are longer than others, but having those different perspectives, they help you grow in different ways that one person can't do that. So, and then lastly, I usually tell people just be patient and persistent. We talked about it earlier. This industry is really one where people tend to stay in jobs for a long period of time. So careers in this industry, they don't move in a straight line. There's tons of people who like jump around to different roles, but as long as that role adds value to you, then you eventually get to where you want to go. So just keep preparing, keep building relationships, and then just stay ready, and then those opportunities will come.
Yeah, I always and mentorship for me is usually in the form of like talking to students about what life looks like after college. And the one that I hit on the most is like it's networking. Like your resume is great, but like you're that network that you build, and don't think that it's not something that you can do until you start working. Like, no, you're a sophomore, start doing it now. Start. If I bring a guest speaker in here, ask questions, get that contact info, go to these events. Like, networking will serve you. I mean, obviously you have to do the hard work part of it, but the networking will serve you so well. Because the story that I tell them is I've never actually gotten a job just by applying. Every job that I've ever gotten, even considering a DAR now, like it's because someone knew me and they knew my work and I knew them. And that's every job. As an adult, like I've never gotten a job. I hate applying for jobs just because, like, man, I got to go through this resume
I was
stuff. But it's always someone who knew me.
Well, it's funny you say that because I was literally about to say the same thing because the job I got in Lexington, I got it because my boss recommended me. When I left Lexington to go to DI, I got that job because somebody at Searchwide, I had been talking to them and they knew who I was. When I decided to leave DI and come to tourism economics, I got that job because I knew Zeke and Zeke was a good friend and he kind of put me in touch with
Yeah,
Eric. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like I've never actually
yeah,
really applied for anything. It's always been from the connections and the
yeah. I'm part of
relationships.
the Zeke Collective, as I call it too, because that's how I got the job at DAR. He made a phone call or
Yeah,
sent a text. Next thing I know, I got an interview. So I always joke with him like,
yeah.
your retirement gig is going to be a DMO or tourism specific executive recruiting firm because like that's just basically what you're doing. Like
That's all,
most
totally. Man.
most
That's
of the
what he does.
staff at Adar are like people that Zeke recommended or brought in. Like his referral checks must have been like on just bonus wise. I'm talking about Zeke's
Right.
money now. I don't care. Uh, but yeah, and one last question, just on the leadership side, like if there was one quality that you think defines a great leader, just from your experience and the people that you have the opportunity to work for. I
Ooh.
know it's tough to limit it to one, but uh, or two. Just
Oh,
talk.
let's see. Well, I touched on transparency earlier, so I would probably say another one. That's tough. Like self-awareness is huge for me. Like I just think, a great leader knows like what they're good at and
Yeah,
what they're not, and that honesty just allows you to build, high performing teams because you're not pretending to be everything. Like you're empowering others to fill the gaps that you can't make. So I'll probably just throw in self-awareness as the other one that's kind of
yeah.
top
I'm
of my
gonna
list.
co-sign on that one too because I had a boss when I was at Visit Tampa Bay, Diane Jacob, and I remember because she had gotten there a little bit before me, and one of my first meetings with her was that like she would fairly openly admit that like she wasn't the strongest marketing person, but like she was a strong leader. And I always respected, I always, and to this day, I always respected her for that because just as a team, she knew how to make sure that we needed what we needed to, to get our jobs done. And looking back on it, I respected it then, but I respect it so much more now because like I've seen the opposite end of that spectrum, where
Yeah.
someone who comes in and wants to know everything that I'm doing every minute of every day is like, nah, you ain't got time for that. You need to you need to give me the tools that I need and kind of set me off my way and trust that I can do it. But I always respected her for that because she knew what she was good at. She let us handle the marketing side. Like she was very focused on leadership and making sure that we had it, what we needed to do. But I always
Hmm.
respect that self awareness that she had about it. So yeah, cosign, co-signing on that one.
Yeah.
All right, now we got to get to this book. So I have, going through the PhD process, I had a couple opportunities to write a book chapter. So I've got, I think, two book chapters that I've written, and I remember, I'm not gonna say it was one of the most horrible things that I've ever did, but it took a lot out of me. Like just trying to write like that,
Yeah.
and that's just the writing part. Like I didn't have to do because I would imagine, getting a book out there and working with publishers and editors and a whole, just a whole, group of people. What was that process like? I can imagine to some degree it's cathartic because you're just getting all this stuff out of your head that's probably been there and putting it, on paper. What was that process
Yeah.
like? Because man, for me, writing I think it was probably like an 18-page chapter was just like, it's just like, man, I can't do this again. So I can't
Yeah.
imagine a book, but
It's it's pretty strenuous, man. Like, for me, and I kept the book kind of short and pretty succinct and to the point. Like I didn't want to have a whole lot of fluff in there. This is my first time actually, writing. Like I do a lot of writing on the blog, but I've never written a book. And I was like, man, let me figure it out, man. I've been speaking to conferences for a long time and workshops and giving up all this free advice for people. And but they all kept running the same thing. It was like, these people who, business owners or entrepreneurs or even students, like they knew their business, but they didn't really know marketing. And so I was like, man, what if I put all this stuff that I kind of know and I talk about a lot, just throw it into a book. Part of it, motivation is kind of like legacy too. It's like I want something out there that lives beyond, workshops and keynotes. I want something that people can look back at again and, break it down to marketing to where it's actually approachable without all the jargon, without having to go back to school to learn it. So the process, I started it back in, I mean, I have a long list of like, I'm a creative. So I have a long list of just ideas and things that I want to do. And, back in, I want to say September of last year, I started putting together like this outline. And I was like, okay, let me do this outline. Let me see what this looks like. And then, I wrote a chapter and I was like, oh, this ain't that bad. And after I got to writing it, I was like, okay, I put it all together. The hard part is that you start to second guess everything because I'm the only one reading it. So I'm reading it like literally every day. And I'm just like, does that sound right? And I thought about trying to, work with an editor or a publisher. I was like, man, I'm just gonna do this thing on my own, man. I'm gonna figure this thing out. I'm gonna try to make this thing work. And I started researching like Amazon, how to self-publish, and I kind of learned on
okay.
there. And then, I ran through some, yeah. So I was just trying to figure out how to do this all on my own, man. And so what people see, like literally, it's my thoughts, And so I tell people, I was like, uh, anybody who's got feedback, like, give me all the feedback because it's the first thing that I've done. And now when I look back, it's like there's probably some areas where I'm like, ooh, I probably could have expanded on this more. I probably could have wrote about this more. There's some things that I think that I would probably do a little bit different. But the process, to your point, it's tedious because you're constantly reading and editing yourself, and you're trying to make sure you cover the basics without. Because again, the end of the day, I didn't want it to be a jargon feel because I love to read books, and I didn't want this marketing book to be something where somebody was like, man, this is long. I wanted to be straight to the point, very applicable. Some worksheets in the back, pull it out, use it, and you can kind of use it as a tool for a long period of time. So that's kind of the premise of the
Yeah,
book.
and I like it, and I admit, horrible host, I haven't finished reading it, but like what I like about it is I feel like it's one of those books that will stand the test of time because marketing changes. Like let's see, something just changed like 30 seconds ago. So I feel like this is a good foundational book that
Right.
just gives you the like just the basics, like the title says, like just the everyday marketer. It just kind of gives you those little tidbits and like it'll still be relevant in 10 years because it's very foundational
Yeah.
in that regard. So I remember just the tedious part of it, like between writing that book chapter, and I remember specifically for my dissertation, like I was using a platform to just to proofread myself. It's called Grammarly. I never felt like I had such a
Yep.
poor use of the English language until Grammarly got a hold of my dissertation. And I was just like, man, I'm never going to get through this because Grammarly humbled me. And it's just because, but when you think about
Yeah.
it, it's like it has to because you are so into this. And there's probably a lot of stuff that I missed. And every now and then I go back and read my dissertation and I'll find typos. I'm like, man, damn, like, how did I miss that? And it's different because
Yep.
this is, it's
Yep.
it's on print, and even though my dissertation, I can't go back and change it, but like I get that tedious part about it because I definitely went through that, and there were moments.
Well, I tell you,
Yeah, go ahead.
I tell you a real quick story, man. So when I first released the book, and I didn't know, again, this comes with like doing it all on my own. So in one of the chapters, I write about the marketing umbrella, and there's a visual where it's just an umbrella, and I list, advertising content, all things that fall underneath the marketing umbrella. Well, when I had done the original file, which was a Word doc, and then I had to change it into an EPUB file for it to go to like the digital
Hmm.
version for Kindle. When I had done that, all of my images actually moved around. So when I printed the first book, the image was on the complete wrong page, and I didn't even know it. I got my author copy. I was like, "Oh hell no, man!" So I actually had to go back, took the book off. I had to resubmit my manuscript a second time, and I think I probably say probably the first 10 people got the wrong version. And it's not like it's in a place where it's like, oh, it doesn't make complete sense. It's just not
Yeah,
where I would have put it at.
something that may be on the
But
internet.
I did have to resubmit a second manuscript.
Yeah, I that's I mean, I can
So,
imagine because for me that was just the scariest feeling. It's like, oh snap, like something's off. As much time as I spent on this
yep.
proofreading and everything, it's just like, man, that word is spelled wrong, and it's not like a complicated word. Like I misspelled
Yeah.
like the easiest word, but
It's out there.
because at that point it's just me proofing it. I had a couple people looking at it, but even then, like my committee, we all missed it. But it's just one of the things where we dove in there so much, like you just miss it because that's your life, especially for X amount of time. Like that's what you're focused on. But
Yeah.
I have to go ahead and admit, I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now that since you've written a book, you just keep sliding down this path of going to get a PhD. So I'm officially recruiting you. I'm putting it out there. AJ didn't know this, but we are both going to like start
There we go.
recruiting you because you're halfway there, man. You need to go ahead and have that
Yeah.
Gathan Borden PhD. You need those letters at the end of your name. So
Put the
I'm gonna go ahead
PhD
and start
behind there.
planting the seed now. I know you got to get the kids out of the house. You got one that's already almost there. Because you have a senior, right? She's a senior. Yeah, you got
Yeah.
one. And you,
Yeah. She's a senior. She's the oldest, and youngest is in eighth
all right,
grade,
so I'm
man.
gonna give you. I'll give you 4 years before we like really start, going in. You can get some more work experience, but you got to do the PhD thing, man, because I feel like you've got just. We need a lot more industry people kind of in that space, speaking to and just reaching these kids like
Yeah.
at that pivotal moment when they're in the classroom. So I'm low key recruiting you. AJ will be dropping by your house and leaving journal articles for you to read at some point
All
because
right.
she's closer than I am, or I might start sending you stuff. So just a heads up now. You probably won't have to save money. You can get a scholarship, and AJ can get you a discount at the University of Louisville.
Right.
I'm sure they'll have a PhD program before it's all said and done.
There we
So
go.
yeah, because I can definitely see you as a teacher too. Because I feel like you'd be great in the classroom. So again, the recruitment process has started. What's that next book look like? I feel like it's already at least in the back of your mind. Is it more of a tourism focused book or one that's focused
Yeah.
on storytelling? Or I feel like you got ideas that are probably
Man.
just
So I have a long list of books, but the one I'm working on now is actually it's not actually even a book. It's actually a journal. So I went through a divorce 2.5 years ago, and during that time, journaling actually really helped me process like emotions and dreams. And I'm also like a big music lover, and so the idea that I've got is I've created this journal that's rooted in song lyrics, and it's combined with writing prompts. So each entry actually has a theme and a prompt, and then there's an accompanying playlist. So there's 52 songs, 52 entries. And the goal is to give people a space to reflect, heal, and grow through music and writing kind of like the same way I did. So I originally had it created for men, but then I said, man, I think it can really appeal to a mass audience. And so there's a lot of, so think of topics of like finances and communication and understanding, friendships, relationships, um, sex, family, legacy, all those things that people need to think about. Like I have a song and some lyrics that apply to each one, and then I have like 5 or 6 prompts that help you write on that topic. And the idea is to get people to write, once a week in the journaling space. And so the goal is to create a different journal for every genre of music. So the first one I'm working on is an R&B version, and but I've got a list for hip hop, for gospel, and then for pop, and then for country. That's the plan.
So wait,
We'll see how far I get with it because it's a lot of work,
all right,
but we'll
I
see
gotta
where it
ask.
goes.
Since you said R&B, are you going '90s R&B? Because that's the heyday
Oh
of
man.
R&B.
I love, yeah, man. I'm
Okay.
a '90s R&B guy, but like I love music, so I go all the way back to the '70s and always like some current stuff. So like, there's just a lot of topics you can cover with a lot of different music. But like, you bring in Earth, Wind, and Fire, you start bringing them into the mix. You bring in like Johnny Kent with Just Got Paid, some of that stuff, and then you start bringing in some other '90s stuff when you get to the '90s, like with Jodeci and H Town and all that. Man, there's just endless ways of bringing in lyrics, and people love music. And so the idea is like you can actually play the playlist while you write to help you inspire yourself while you're writing in the prompt. So that's the
That's
goal.
cool, man. Again, I'm a co-sign that. So keep me posted on that because I love the music part of that and how music can help you just because I figure a lot of people struggle with writing and to some degree,
They do.
journaling and putting their thoughts out there like that. And I love the angle of music using music as a vehicle to kind of help you do that. So just full of ideas, folks. This guy, but yeah,
That's what I
yeah,
do,
yeah.
man.
But that's it. I appreciate you being here, man. I appreciate just the time. I feel like this is going to be my most highly watched podcast up to this point. Just hearing you drop all this knowledge, and I'm sure people will love the fact that you watch soap operas. I might put that in the description to somehow.
Hey,
I gotta.
hey, who else watches soap operas? I hope he don't kill me, but Timothy Bush from Lake Charles, Louisiana,
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
CMO there. Timothy is a Bold and Beautiful fan too, man. He and I haven't had a chance to really talk deeply about Bold and Beautiful, but he gets into it as well, man. But nah, honestly, man, kudos to you for starting the this podcast, man. And again, I hope that this is the first of many that have high ratings, man. I hope the people after me, get more views and so forth, man. So I wish
Yeah.
you the best of luck on this, man. This is an awesome endeavor. So congratulations to
Similar
you as
kind of
well.
what you were talking about earlier, and I'm kind of jumping topic to talk about specifically this podcast. But you know what I like about doing it? It's a couple of things. For one, like it's a one man band. Like I'm producing every part of this. I'm writing the scripts. I'm recording. I'm
Yep.
editing. I'm figuring out ways to get it out there. But you know what I have that this gives me that nothing ever in my career has is that I get to use everything that I've ever learned in doing this. Like going all the way back to my
Yeah.
undergraduate degree, I was a communications major, advertising minor. I get to use elements of that. I get to use my master's and PhD like on the tourism side, and then just work experience. So like this is the first thing that I've ever done where it's just like every episode I have to bring in all that experience and because I love my work that I do at Adara, but like I don't get to use the PhD part of that hardly if ever,
Yep.
or in other positions where like I was using work experience or something, but here like I get to use it all, and it's been extremely therapeutic to some degree. Like just being able to do this and just
Yeah, I
kind of put
bet.
it out there. So again, it's always great when I have just phenomenal people in the industry that I can call on. Just be like, hey, come join me on the podcast. So I appreciate you. This won't be you'll be back. I'm waiting on that the second book or the second journal or the next step in evolution that is Gathan. So again, man, I appreciate you. Thank you for taking
Yeah.
time out. I know it's a Friday evening. You're ready to get your weekend started, but appreciate you, man. Thank you for Gathan for joining us. And again, man, I'll see you on the road. I'm sure I'll get to a conference or something like that. I'll see you around.
Yeah. I'll be out there, man. So again, thanks for having me too on the show, man. I appreciate it, man. And good luck to you
All
as
right, I
well, bro.
appreciate it. Well, that wraps up episode 3 of the Insightful Podcast. A huge thank you to our guest, Gathan D. Borden, for sharing his journey, insights, and perspective on the future of tourism and destination marketing. If you'd like to connect with Gathan or learn more about his work, you can find him on LinkedIn or check out his new book, The Everyday Marketer, and you can find it on Amazon. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share so you never miss a conversation. I'm Dr. Jeremy Fairley, and until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep moving tourism forward.